Matt, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Hey, welcome to what I'm currently calling Bob's Bubble. Please don't pop. It is a way for me to connect or reconnect with people that have been important to me. And really, it's a way to say thank you. And to you, you were to me a mentor. You hired me. You brought me to California, for which I'm truly grateful. And I just wanted to basically, record these things just for me. And they'll be sort of extended. I'm not going to do a lot of editing, and I'm not going to um, make it like a job. Who are you? Where were you born? What's your ethnic background? Just sort of introduce yourself a little bit.
I was born in Portland, Oregon, Chinese American. Um, just always been involved in media since I was in grade school. I mean, I loved recordings, audio, watching TV. I mean, I was obsessed with it. And then once I got to high school, I started doing films. And of course, when I when I got to college, I figured I'd do what all good Asians should do and pursue sciences. So I became a geologist. And I realized about sophomore year that I was never going to be as into this as the people around me. So I decided enough. And so tried to pursue a film career at the University of Oregon, but they didn't really have that. So they did have broadcasting. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And the rest is history. I've never done anything else other than broadcast television.
That's interesting. I had no idea that you had a geology background. For me, I got into television because it was really the only thing that I liked. I think similarly, I started out in high school doing shows and things on stage, and we started doing some Super 8 films, and I really liked that. And that sort of took me from there through college and then ultimately KPIX, where I started, and really pretty much enjoyed those days.
Those
you know,
were peak television. People don't realize it. That was peak television.
how so? Explain.
Well, because our ratings back then were higher than any of the network ratings in prime time.
Oh, really?
People watched local TV. People really admired people on local TV, and it was important to them. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't all filled with syndicated ads for national products. It was all mostly local. So it was local TV was in its glory days, and it was making money hand over fist. I mean, it was amazing to be part of that.
When did you come into the show? Like, I know it started, I think, sometime in the late 70s. When did you get there?
I got there like 79 is when I first arrived there, and I came there as an editor, video editor, and I had no idea how to edit. I mean, I had dabbled with CMX, at the time, which was
Yeah,
the computer editing systems with punch codes and stuff, but I wasn't an editor. I didn't really know. I mean, I knew how to put two pieces of film together, two images together, and do effects and stuff, but I wasn't an editor, right? An editor is more than a button pusher, it's a storyteller. Um, and boy, at evening, you were forced to be a storyteller. You
for
know
sure.
that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, for those who don't know, I spent the majority of my career as an editor, better or worse. I mean, I think it was a great career, certainly engaging mentally. You had to maintain focus, and they depended on you, especially in those days. That's one of the things I found going forward was that in the older days, the editing was more appreciated because it was linear, and you had to do
Oh,
a lot
yeah.
more pre-conceptual type of stuff, and people enjoyed that. And I remember one of the things I really enjoyed with you as my manager was the fact that, first of all, you had edited, so you knew what we were going through. And your feedback was always concrete. It was good. It was something I could work with because that wasn't always the case. A lot of people didn't understand editing. You did. And so
Yeah. Well,
thank you
I
for
mean,
that.
part of that is you have to understand the process. And if you don't understand the process, your advice is general and it's kind of bullshit because it's like, well, how do you want me to do that?
Right.
Well, can you go back? No, I can't go back because in those days when you push record, it was a commitment because you couldn't go back. So I always used to tell people, like, if you're stuck, watch from the beginning because it tells you where to go. It gives you the pace, it gives you the rhythm, it gives you the story. Because what we had to do was extraordinary. Most people didn't have to do this. We would get like a stack of tapes, these Betamax or even three
It
quarter.
was three-quarter
It
back
was
when we
three quarter.
started. Yeah.
Yeah, and handwritten notes about what's on the tapes and what the story is. And we'd have to sit there, the editors would have to log the tapes, find the sound bites, and then construct the story and choose the music and all the other stuff. Because at that point, when you're editing, you're operating at a whole different level. You're operating visually, through words, through VO, through music, and through natural sound. And all that stuff has to be in play. And you're manipulating that at every level, every edit. And people just don't never appreciate that.
Well, for you, by the time I got there, and I think I came to KPIX, maybe 83, I think 80, something like that. You guys had changed the form so that we were given at least a rough script that was required of the producers. Probably, I would guess you probably implement that change because it would be too much, and probably was too much for the editors in the early days when.
Oh, the early days, we were logging 120-hour weeks.
I'm surprised you survived it.
Well, and I didn't. I had a mental breakdown at one point.
What?
And
Tell me about that.
That's why I became a producer.
Give me some detail.
Well, I had just gone through, like 120-hour week where I was just there all the time and never had a break. And finally, I just couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't push the button. And, they came in and then they sent me to a psychiatrist and they said, this is the worst case of work stress we have ever seen. And so they did change the system, because we didn't get overtime. We got what they call comp time, right? So
Right.
an extra day off. But you can never take a day off if you're working 120 hours a week.
Right.
So, and at that point, I had started doing a little producing. And it was interesting because I think my second piece won an Emmy. I Fought Superfoot. If you remember, I don't know if you were there at the time, but
I wasn't, but I think I remember the story, or I saw it, or people told me about it. But continue.
Yeah. So, and then I became a full-fledged producer, and but I still worked with the editors because editing is the core of what I do. I mean, it was tough. You just toughed it out because that's your work ethic, but it was inhumane and it wasn't right. But there is a work kind of ethic that still needs to be maintained.
Oh, sure. So your career, then you moved on from Eden, because let's kind of go through a little bit, through where you ended up getting ultimately to Chino and Chicano, Chicano. Okay.
I started in public television in Portland, and then I hired King in Seattle, and then I was there 11 months and got hired away to KPIX in San Francisco, and was at KPIX in San Francisco for about 6 years, and then I got fired. I just didn't get along with the show producer at the time, and so that was it. My wife Guy was going to have a baby, so I had to do something. So I started freelancing and I worked on some videos for Esquire magazine, home videos. And then I ended up working in Sacramento at a station called KCRA. And once I was at KCRA, Evening Magazine came calling again, but it was the national show. And they said, would you be willing to come back and produce the national show? So that's what I did. I did that for 2 years, but I didn't move my family. So I commuted from Sacramento to San Francisco every day,
No, that
which
must have
was
been tough.
brutal. At the time, it wasn't, but because the building boom hadn't started. But, so what started as a 90-minute commute became almost 2.5 hours at the end of 2 years. So then from there, I did that for a couple of years. And then I decided I'm tired of this commute. So I took a job at another station in Sacramento and was running that station. Um, and I was with this corporation that ran it for 10 years. And I rose up to the president level in production because it was a local station that only had Murder She Wrote. And what was the other two guys? The two guys, oh God, the Murder She Wrote was a CBS show. Murder She Wrote, and then there were two guys that were like detectives or something. That was their
So
only
many
two
of them.
shows.
Yeah.
And and we couldn't do any business with local fast foods or car dealerships. So I started creating shows because that's my background, right? So I created a bunch of local shows that all went into syndication. And syndication means it's a local show that's sold nationally and run. And one of the shows was a show called Scratch, which Lisa Ling came out of. And so I did that. And then they thought, like, well, this is legitimate business. So then I moved in and started a new division for them, a production division. And I left the station, but I was continuing with the Bilo Corporation. And I rose up to the president of the production company. And then we purchased a station in Seattle called Cairo. And I came up and they had a production division there. And I said, shit, I'd love to move back to Seattle, the Northwest. So that's what we did. And so we started there doing production, doing shows. And then they decided to get even bigger, going from 7 stations to 22 stations, and wanted me to move to Texas. And I said, homeboy doesn't go to Texas. So I said, let me buy my division. Well, at the time, they didn't even know what they had, because they were TV station centric. So they had what was basically at the time, the Food Network and some other ones. And they just decided to sell it all off. And they didn't see the value of what I was doing, even though the financial analyst said there's a potential here. So I said, well, sell it to me. So they sold me my division for $27,000. That was like,
that's a
and
good
I go,
buy.
yeah, sure, I'll do that deal. Not knowing that I had a $2 million deal from Home and Garden for a show called Gardening by the Yard in my pocket, which lasted for 12 years. So I ran that for 14 years. And when I sold the company, we were doing 25 million in revenue. We had 5 network shows going, and it was pretty successful, but I just got tired of it. And so I quit and retired at 60 and started dabbling in stuff, but I just didn't want to do any TV.
What about Hoarders? Did we miss Hoarders in here?
Oh yeah, that was one of the last shows. Hoarders.
Okay. Yeah. Good. You got to mention Hoarders. Everybody knows that one. It's it's a good one.
Yeah, and well, it's still on the air, and they renewed it. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's kind of a weird legacy to have with a show like Hoarders, but it's weird because within the first 3 weeks of the show, it was viral, and we were on Oprah and everybody else, and people imitated the show. I mean, CSI did a whole episode based on Hoarders, and it was just crazy.
How'd you get the idea?
I got the idea because my son Max was studying in Japan at the time, and we go over and visit. And Japanese television is weird. They'd have talk shows about other talk shows about other talk shows. And one of the shows they had was sort of a Good Morning America show, and they had these people come in the Tokyo to clean up a house, which is like what they roughly translate a garbage house, and it was a hoarder's house, and it was a lot of drama, a lot of rats, a lot of screaming, yelling, and I said, that's pretty good TV. So I came back and started researching it, and I said, I've seen those kind of homes, and there was no definition for them. So I came up with the term hoarders. And that's part of the vernacular now. People will say like, oh, you're a hoarder. And no one ever used to say that.
Right.
So like I said, it's a really weird legacy to have.
It is, but television is a weird industry to be in. Recognizing what you need to tap into is where I think you had a lot of success. Obviously, you did. Just so we can get off of this part, I just want to get to what you're doing now, and amongst other things. But I did watch a couple of your podcasts, Chino y Chicano, and it was good. Tell me a little bit about that as sort of the end of the the resume part of it.
Oh, well, Enrique and I have been friends since I was at King TV, so we've known each other for nearly 50 years. And when I came back to Seattle, we just re-engaged as friends. And he was doing some media stuff, and everybody was doing podcasts, but he was unsatisfied because he'd be on podcasts, and most podcasts are about me, right? I mean, even if it's topical, generally it's about people who are so glad that they have their own show, and so
Okay.
it's I don't know, it just bothered him. So he called me up and said, "Look, let's do a podcast. I want to do one." And I go, "Sure, I'll be your Ed McMahon." So, so I'm there, sort of provide color, but the viewpoint of it was real interesting. We said, let's talk about events and things that affect people's lives through a lens of people of color. So we're not going to code switch. We're not going to say like, "Well, Robert, where have your journeys taken you today?" It's like it'd be more like, "Hey, Bob, where the fuck have you been?"
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so it's different. It's how people of color really talk to each other.
It's because I heard the term code switching. I'd never heard it. So just give me the definition of what code switching is, so that I know and other people know. It's new to me, and maybe it shouldn't be, but I've never
Well,
heard it.
because you wouldn't know. Because if you're a dominant culture, if you're a white male, especially, whatever room you walk into, you're on equal footing with anyone, and you feel you deserve to be heard, right? Well, because you all share a cultural, socioeconomic background generally. For people of color, before you speak, there's a filter that you go like, how do I say that so these people will understand me, and so they don't think I'm some rube or something. It's true. So people of color who navigate successfully in the white world always code switch because you have to determine. So it takes a lot of processing power. Whereas, most people of color you know, that are marginalized, you go like, well, why do they talk like that? Why are they doing that? Why do they say that? Because they're speaking honestly to each other in the way they understand, because they're not code switching for the dominant culture. But most people who are successful in the white world have to do that. And I decided I'm retired. I've done my work. I'm done with that.
Good. So you know what? People are gonna tune in, and they're gonna see you speak in a real way.
Yeah.
So maybe people will be more interested to do that now if they start to hear that. But anyway, that's really interesting. I think I want to just go through a couple of things because I know your time is precious. So is mine. But so I wrote a couple of notes here. Give me just a second. Did your career, Bob? Here's a good one. Without making your head swell, I would have to say you are gifted. Intellectually, you're one of the smartest guys I know. And my question is, do you agree? And when did you realize that? And did you maximize it?
I didn't realize it till I was through working. And I started reflecting on what I knew. And my job personally was to distill it down to the essence of what it is that I do that makes me successful. And when I realized that, I started realizing other people don't think that way, you know, and because you're just working, you're striving, you're pushing. And so when you do reflect that, the world becomes a little different. You're more tolerant because you realize, people are different. Have different gifts. And in my case, yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that helped me survive is because when I did walk into a room, even if I had to code switch, I never felt inferior. And I talk to a lot of people of color and they feel inferior, and it cripples them in a lot of ways.
Sure. So that leads me to sticking with the same thought. Who was Matt Chan back when I knew him versus Matt Chan now? When you look back, I remember the motorcycle riding dude. You were I don't want to use the term macho because that's not really what I mean, but you were big, you were bold, you were bad. Have you maintained that? Had you mellowed? Is there a reason to mellow if you did?
I've mellowed, just because when you have kids and grandkids, it mellows you out. But I could still turn that on because there are going to be times in your life where you need to portray different people. And yeah, I can turn that on. But back then, I was a raw knife blade, right? Just rattling around in a box, you know. And and we were having fun, because there's very few times when I go back to talk about peak TV, there were very few times in our careers where you got to do pretty much anything you wanted. You got to express yourself pretty much any way you wanted. And as long as you were successful, they said, go for it. TV now is a corporate business. You have notes, people give you critiques, you're just part of a cog. I mean, I knew that my time was up when you'd be in a fine cut, which, for people listening is like, that should be it. There are no more changes. And then you would get a whole set of notes from someone you've never even heard of. And you go, who the hell is that?
Yeah.
And I go like, this has changed. This is not fun anymore.
That drove me out of the business,
Yeah. But given that, it's real interesting because the freedom that the internet gives you, the tools available to people, there's a lot of creative stuff. I don't know if there's visually really creative stuff. The one thing is missing is really good creative storytelling. All the elements are out there. They just need that person to say, I see it. I see it. I see that as something that could be told really well. And these are the tools I'm going to use.
That's the storytelling. What we did learn on the evening, and in my career going forward, if people knew that I was on evening and the KPIX version of the show in PM Magazine, they knew that we could tell stories.
Well, they knew that we were the best. I mean, that's crazy when you think about it, because we were just a bunch of goofballs. But
that was a ton of good people on that show. The photographers,
there was
the editors,
so much talent.
Yeah, for sure.
There was so much talent because you would see other shows at the station we'd be doing, and you go like, "Oh my God, what trash!"
Yeah.
And you wouldn't even know why, but you just realized then how much better you were, But you never had a chance to enjoy that because you were working so fucking hard.
Yeah, for sure. But it was, there were tough times. There were things I didn't like, and I'm not going to really go there. But I look back and I go, you know what? Some of the best TV I ever worked on was on some of those stories. So I do. I really am happy that I did that.
Some of the best stories that I remember with you are editing with you when I was producing. I remember I would be out on assignment. I remember one. Was it the Michael Jackson story?
Which one?
The one that I had to go and cover in Kansas City. And it was a quick turnaround. It was a proof of performance that we could do the story, turn it around, and air it the next day. And the next day, the head of the show at that time was Bob George, was going to present at NAPI, the big convention. And I just remember working a couple of days straight, flying overnight and getting into San Francisco, bringing the box of tapes, and you're sitting in the edit room, and we go at it. And then I hopped the plane and flew it to Houston, where the convention was, and delivered the tape. I mean, we did more than just one of those, you and I. And those were the best because we knew each other's moves so well that it just flowed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good, the working relationship between the producer and the editor was, if it was good, the story was good. So, doesn't always work that way these days. I want to keep moving through some things here because I know our times are tight. I got to talk to you about this because I know that you're going to have insights for me and everybody. AI. Good, bad. Where's it going? I have my own personal feelings, but I'd like to hear yours.
I think AI is fascinating. I think it's a shortcut, it's a tool to use that you need to master in order to understand it. But as a shortcut to creativity, it doesn't work. Not for me, because it does what it's like research, right? It's like research. It doesn't ever give you something new. It just aggregates existing knowledge into a fancy package. But they'll never give you the story twist. They'll never give you that human insight, the rhythm, the feel. You know, as an editor, you know this. You have a style. People can watch your stuff and say, "Oh yeah, Bob edited that." If they're good, if they understand it, because every editor is like an artist, is an artist. They have their own rhythm, they have their own pace, they have their own toolbox. And that's one thing AI can assimilate all those different styles, but ultimately it's sterile in terms of true storytelling. Yeah, you can mock up a picture of Biden with Trump's face on him riding a dog or something and everybody laughs, but is that art? Is that real? Does that advance the culture? I think AI is important, but I think people have to understand its place. It's not a replacement, it's a tool.
I think I totally agree with you on that. Just like a calculator was a great new thing, but people were afraid that, everybody would become stupid if they had a calculator. Well, no, the smart people
Well,
used it as a
it
tool.
did dumb up some people, but
Well, the average, but the scientists of the world used it to just do what they needed to do faster, but
exactly.
they still knew how to do what it did, and it didn't completely replace it for them. And I think AI will do the same thing, or at least I hope it.
I hope so.
Yeah. Um, we have to talk about health, and we're both getting older, and you've had some issues of late that you've been public with, and I'm just wondering what you could or would share with me today.
Well, I was diagnosed with cancer, metastatic renal carcinoma, kidney cancer, um, well, not quite 2 years ago. And, it was bad. Um, and then I got on treatment, and that was good until the immunotherapy started killing me. It started attacking good tissue. And so it took about since last summer to tame it by Christmas. But in that time of trying to arrest the damage it was doing, the cancer came back because of the lack of treatment. So right now, for the past month, it's been brutal. I mean, I spend more days lying down
No.
than up and about. And as an active guy, it's killing me. But, I know at some point the cancer will kill me. And I just have to kind of live day to day. But, the new treatment they put me on, I feel is working. I feel it. You get, when you're sick like this, you're very attuned to your body, you know. Aches and pains are attributable, yes, to old age, but some of them aren't, and you're keenly aware. So that's sort of where I'm at. I mean, I know that this new regimen, if it works, maybe it works for a year, maybe less, and then we're in the same position. And maybe they have new drugs by then. Maybe they have different kind of therapies because it's advancing quickly. But the realistic thing is, my time is limited. And I look at these episodes as sort of like kind of brutal coming attractions to, you know, what your summation of your movie is going to be like. And it's sobering. Um, I think as time goes on, it's less frightening because it's inevitable. It's inevitable for all of us. I just have a little bit clearer roadmap of what's going to happen.
How about Guy and the rest of the family? How are they doing with this?
It's really hard because everybody kind of processes what's happening differently. So I don't even presume to guess. I just have to take people on face value. I mean, people stop communicating with you. That's one way. People overly communicate with you. But for the most part, people are good. And just realize that, when you reach out to someone with cancer, it's important because you're still that person, maybe diminished a little bit, but you still are that person.
Good. Um, as we, kind of, round out this conversation, I put down actually this just three more things, but they're all kind of short. Do you have any regrets? I know that I sort of had some looking back, things I wish I would have done, things I wish maybe I didn't say. How about you? Is there anything you regret?
You know, I don't regret anything because you just can't. I mean, that's sort of a pointless exercise
Do you
because
think?
what's done is done. What's interesting is I did for a lot of my career feel like, well, what the fuck are you doing? You're making stupid TV shows. You're entertaining people. And then when I retired, I did have an epiphany, and I thought like, no, you can make a difference. So I started doing videos for communities, especially the Asian community, who's always been underrepresented. And I was able to make a difference in a lot of things politically, sociologically. And I realized I'm a storyteller and I don't have to be there entertaining people, sorting through their garbage, but I can make a difference because I can tell a story that moves people. And that was sort of the best part of my career.
So that's your legacy, because that was my next thing, is your legacy.
My legacy is, yeah, is that. It's just storytelling makes a difference.
Good. And I think, unless you have anything else you want to share with me, the only thing I would ask is that you would give me and anybody else your few words of wisdom. But if you would, and you don't have to, your Irish brogue was the best, and I'd love to hear it in the Irish brogue.
Oh, I can't even really get back to that.
Oh, you can't do? Oh man, it was so funny. I
Well,
mean,
it was a story I did when we did the sewers of San Francisco.
oh yes, it
And
was
all
the
the
wheel.
guys,
They got the wheel.
they got the wheel. And I said, well, what's the wheel? He goes, you don't want to know what the wheel is. And I go like, well, I'll bet you it's the wheel. That's all they would say. And all these guys were just like, this cabal of Irish guys. And it was hilarious. And so, yeah, I did co-opt that for a while. And I don't know if I could still do it, but it was
funny.
one of those things that, like, you never know, because the wheel can creep up on you. You don't know where it is. It could be anywhere. It could be.
Oh man, you cut out right in the end of that, but I don't know what happened. But anyway, Matt, listen, anything else? I just want to say thanks, and I'll talk to you soon. I'll get this edited some point soon, and I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.